They say the dead can't speak, but what if they never stopped screaming? What if the silence you hear at night is just their frequency, waiting for someone broken enough to listen? I took a job guarding a dead mall for $50 a night, thinking I had nothing left to lose. But Anchor Point Plaza wasn't just haunted, it was hungry, and I'd soon learn that some second chances cost more than your soul. The keys to Anchor Point Plaza felt unnaturally cold in my hand, old brass relics, their edges worn smooth by time and repetition. They rattled like bones when I moved, as if the mall itself recognized me, not as a savior or protector, but as someone returning to the scene of a quiet, smoldering crime. I stood at the entrance, its twin glass doors fractured with spiderweb cracks that distorted my reflection into something almost human. The man staring back wasn't the Marine I once was. I barely recognized him. Salt and pepper beard unkempt, hollow eyes rimmed with sleepless nights, a frame too thin for the uniform I hadn't worn in years. $50 cash, 12 hours on patrol, a roof over my head for one more night. That was the deal. No questions asked, no paperwork, no ID badge. Just the keys and a warning I didn't understand until much later. When you're drifting from shelter to shelter, carrying nightmares heavier than your pack, you don't ask for job descriptions. You say yes, and pray whatever haunts the place has the courtesy to leave you alone. I slid the main key into the lock. It turned reluctantly, with a groan that sounded too organic for metal. Like the mall was protesting, urging me to walk away before it was too late. The door swung inward, releasing a gust of air that carried the thick, unmistakable scent of charred plastic and time-worn smoke. Not fresh, but deep-rooted, the kind of stink that has had years to sink into concrete and memory. Mr. Hayes had told me not to bother locking it behind me. "Ain't nobody trying to break into this place," he rasped, shifting in his wheelchair as he handed me a clipboard. "It's getting out, that's the problem." He chuckled after that, a sound like dry leaves scraping pavement, but I saw no humor in the half-melted ruins of his face. Burn scars covered most of his skin, like wax left too close to a flame, and when he spoke, his voice rasped like sandpaper against bone. I glanced at the clipboard. It had a hand-drawn map of the mall with arrows and circled checkpoints, security office, food court, West Wing corridor, cinema, department store. Each point had a scribbled note in faded blue ink, and at the bottom a line written in shaky all caps. Rule 1. Do not look into the mirrors after midnight. I stared at it longer than I should have. It felt less like instruction and more like a warning. Hayes caught me reading and nodded solemnly. "Not everything in there's a reflection," he said, turning his wheelchair toward his office door. "Some things look back." He paused in the doorway, silhouetted by the dim yellow light of his office. "Just one more thing, Cole," he said. "Don't try to save them. They're not people anymore." I didn't ask who they were. Some questions are better left unanswered, especially in places where time doesn't move quite right. Inside the mall, silence wasn't truly silent. It carried a low hum, like an old radio stuck between frequencies, bleeding static into your bones. My boots echoed too loudly across cracked tiles, each step bouncing off dead storefronts and vacant glass displays, like I was disturbing something that had grown used to being forgotten. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting trembling shadows that didn't always match my movement. Some lights buzzed, others stayed cold and dead. Still, they gave just enough illumination to hint at the shape of things. Boarded windows, empty kiosks, water-stained ceilings, and an escalator forever frozen mid-climb. The mall's bones were intact, but its flesh had long since rotted. I followed, the first route on the clipboard, heading toward the central concourse. Old banners still clung to the rafters above. Black Friday blowout. Everything 50% off. Their bright colors muted by soot and age. The exclamation points felt obscene, Now desperate remnants of a day that had ended in fire and death. 37 people died here during the riot. That was the number Hayes had mentioned, a number too precise to be rumor. As I moved through the abandoned space, something shifted. Not physically, no sudden crash or wind, but emotionally, like walking into a room and knowing you're not alone. A subtle pull in the air, like static clinging to skin. I passed a kiosk with shattered glass and saw my reflection in a shard at my feet. It flickered, almost imperceptibly, like it had blinked. Rule 1 surged back into my mind. I kept walking. Near the food court, tables were still arranged like they expected customers. Chairs neatly pushed in, trays left mid-meal, napkin holders full. A scene paused mid-breath. It made the decay feel recent, like this place had only just fallen into ruin. Then I saw it. Beneath an overturned chair lay a small singed teddy bear, one arm missing, fur blackened at the seams. I hesitated before picking it up. When I did, my fingers came away damp with something that wasn't water. It shimmered like oil, slick and warm under the stuttering lights. Suddenly the lighter in my pocket, her lighter, felt heavier. I pulled it out, running my thumb over the engraving like I had 1,000 times before. To Devon, love liar. I hadn't used it in months, couldn't bring myself to. The last time it lit anything was the candle at Sophie's memorial. And then, Daddy. The voice was unmistakable, small, innocent, my daughter's. It came from the corridor leading to the west wing, dark, cold, humming louder than before. I froze, the bear still in my hand, the lighter still clenched like a talisman. I whispered her name. Sophie. No answer, only the hum, the flickering lights, the weight of memory pressing into my chest like a loaded weapon. I should have walked away, left the bear, left the job, found another place to sleep, but instead I tucked the bear into my jacket and kept walking. The corridor stretched out like the throat of something asleep but dreaming, dark, narrow, pulsing with a sound that shouldn't exist. That hum. It wasn't just in the air anymore. It had a direction, a gravity. I could feel it pulling me, deeper into the west wing, past storefronts whose names had long faded, whose interiors reeked of mildew and disuse. My boots made no sound on the scuffed tiles now, as if the mall were absorbing them, swallowing me step by step. I passed what looked like a boutique once. The window was cracked, but intact enough to catch a flash of movement. I turned, but there was nothing there. Just my own distorted reflection, except it wasn't mine. The figure looking back had my face, yes, but its eyes were wrong. Wide, bloodshot, smiling too much, teeth too white. I backed away without thinking, the clipboard slipping in my grip. That's when I noticed the second rule, scribbled in a different pen at the top corner of the map, almost as if it had been added after the fact, after someone else had learned it the hard way. Rule 2, never follow voices into the dark. If you do, don't bring anything back. My mouth went dry. My fingers brushed the lump in my pocket, the teddy bear, still damp, still unnaturally heavy. The hallway narrowed as I approached what remained of a children's clothing store, its sign partially melted, letters warped into unreadable glyphs. The humming intensified there, vibrating through my boots, rattling something loose inside my chest, and then, again, her voice. Daddy, fainter this time, echoing off walls, yet close enough to be real. I told myself it wasn't Sophie, couldn't be, but I followed anyway. Not because I believed, but because part of me needed it to be true. The air turned colder with each step. The overhead lights flickered slower now, as if the current running through them were being siphoned by something else. The deeper I went, the more the mall changed. It wasn't decay anymore, it was transformation. The storefronts didn't look broken, they looked molted, as if shedding their commercial skin to reveal something older beneath. Mold bloomed in swirling spiral, patterns on the ceiling. Vines, not of any plant I recognized, twined through shattered neon signage, and always, always that hum. I reached the toy store. The security gate was halfway down, leaving a narrow crawl space beneath. A single naked bulb swung inside, casting long rhythmic shadows. Something moved behind a fallen display case. "Daddy, I'm scared." My legs moved before my mind caught up. I ducked under the gate, hand gripping the lighter in my pocket. Inside, the store was a ruin of twisted plastic, charred shelves, and price tags that had fused with melted linoleum. Posters for long-forgotten toys peeled from the walls, and display signs mocked me with cheerful fonts, blowout deals. Doorbusters, only today. And then I saw her. At least what was left. She'd once been a teenage girl, maybe, but whatever had happened here had twisted her into something else entirely. Her lower body was fused to a shopping cart, flesh melted, into plastic, skin warped like candle wax. Her arms ended in mannequin joints, stiff and expressionless, but her eyes, God, her eyes were alive, too alive. The lighter grew warm in my hand, the metal pulsing like a heartbeat. My dog tags vibrated against my chest. I stepped forward. "You okay, kid?" I asked. The words came out on instinct. Marine training. See someone in need. Step up. The girl's head tilted slowly. Her lips didn't move, but I heard Sophie's voice again, clear as a bell. "I'm cold, Daddy." No, this wasn't real. This wasn't right. The floor beneath me rippled like disturbed water. The lights dimmed to a pulse. The air turned metallic. I squeezed my eyes shut. "1," I whispered. "2, 3, 4. I remembered Rule 4 from the clipboard, scrawled at the very bottom in panicked handwriting. If the world starts to bleed, close your eyes and count to 10. 5, 6, 7. The hum rose to a shriek. The static in my ears blotted. Outthought memory, identity. Just numbers now, only numbers. 9, 10. The floor solidified beneath me. The air cleared just enough to breathe again. When I opened my eyes, she was closer. The girl thing. Arms outstretched, reaching. For the dog tags around my neck. And she whispered. Sophie's voice, but twisted through grief and something ancient. "I missed you." I stumbled backward, knocking over a shelf of ruined board games. The crash echoed far too long, like the mall itself was replaying it in loops. The girl didn't follow. She just watched, head now bent at an impossible angle, eyes unblinking. Backed out from under the security gate, not looking away, not trusting my instincts. Only when I was safely in the corridor again did I let myself breathe. And then I noticed something else. The one-armed mannequin, the one I'd passed earlier, was now standing differently. It had moved. Its remaining arm pointed down a new corridor toward the escalators leading to the second floor. Its cracked, featureless face tilted toward me in silent insistence. I looked back once at the toy store, at the half-seen shape still waiting in the dark. Then I followed the mannequin's direction, not because I trusted it, but because, in that moment, I didn't trust myself, because the voice had felt real, because part of me still wanted to follow it, and because the bear in my pocket still felt warm, too warm. The corridor leading to the escalators felt longer than it had any right to be. My boots moved on muscle memory, but my mind lagged behind, dragged down by the image of that half-human girl fused to the cart. Her eyes haunted me, eyes that didn't belong in that body, eyes that looked at me and saw something I wasn't sure I could face. They hadn't followed me, but they didn't need to. The voice had come with me, nestled into my chest beside the teddy bear, beside the guilt I'd been carrying for years. The mannequin stood motionless at the corridor's junction, a grotesque imitation of life, its single arm still extended like a guide or a judge. The face had no features, just a crack running down the left side from temple to chin, like someone had tried to split it open and only half succeeded. I hesitated before passing it. Every part of me screamed not to turn my back on it, but I kept moving. The hallway opened into another wing, one of the older sections of the mall, judging by the outdated storefronts and faded promotional posters still clinging to the walls. Most of the displays had been stripped, but not all. Mannequins stood scattered in unnatural poses, some missing limbs, others tilted slightly as though frozen mid-stumble. Their stillness wasn't peaceful. It was anticipatory, like they were just waiting for me to blink. As I passed a clothing store, its windows broken but intact enough to reflect, I caught a glimpse of movement from the corner of my eye. I turned sharply, lighter drawn, only to find nothing but mannequins. Still, somehow I knew they hadn't been in those exact positions a moment earlier. I glanced back down at the clipboard, now smeared with oil and damp from my own sweat. In smaller, messier handwriting, different again from the other rules, was the third one. Rule 3. Don't speak to the mannequins unless they speak first. That sounded absurd until that moment. But absurdity had become my reality. I read the line again and again, as if repetition could summon clarity. It didn't. I kept walking. The next mannequin I passed was positioned like it was walking too, arm extended, fingers curled unnaturally. Its head was turned in my direction, slightly too far, like a person with a broken neck trying to keep me in view. The joints were poorly attached, the seams at the elbows and shoulders visible in the fluorescent light. One leg was bent at a strange angle, and there were scratches around the ankles as if it had been dragged across the floor. I stared at it too long. Devon. The voice didn't come from the mannequin, it came from all around, a whisper unmistakable. Devon. My name. Spoken in Lia's voice this time. I stepped back, instinctively reaching for my dog tags. They were warm, vibrating again. More. Mannequins ahead now, 3 of them, all positioned like they were standing in a loose semicircle facing a boarded-up department store. One of them was different. Its plastic arm was missing, but its other hand pointed directly at the center of the display, a mirror. It had no frame, no backing, just a clean pane of silver-backed glass resting in a busted jewelry display. A single shard of light bounced off it from above, making it glint like a warning. I didn't want to look, but I did, and it didn't show me, not as I was. It showed me the night of the accident. Lia's car, the twisted metal, the steam curling from the hood, headlights shattered, glass scattered like ice across the asphalt, Sophie's stuffed unicorn crushed beneath a front tire. My house in the background, the porch light on, me passed out inside. Bottle still on the table, lighter just inches from my limp hand. I staggered backward, hand over my mouth, bile rising into my throat. The mannequins were closer now. No footsteps, no sound, just closer. One of them raised a hand. It pointed, not to the mirror but to my chest. To the dog tags, they were burning hot. I forced myself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. You're not crazy. This place is crazy. You're just surviving it. But another voice whispered, are you? Or are you finally seeing? Tread clearly. I turned to flee, but the way back was blocked. Not physically, there were no walls, no gates, just mannequins. Dozens of them now, positioned like theater-goers watching me stumble through the middle of the stage. I turned toward the boarded department store instead. The boards weren't nailed down properly. They shifted when I pushed. Inside, it was darker than the rest of the mall. The mannequins continued into the store, more of them, some standing, some sitting, some in fragments, but all of them arranged deliberately, like an audience. A display in the middle of the store glowed with faint blue light. I approached it slowly, the hum from earlier returning in full force. My ears rang. My stomach twisted. My lighter sparked. Once, then went dead. The display was an old promotional kiosk. The screen had cracked and shorted long ago, but now it flickered to life. A home video. Laya, holding Sophie on her hip, smiling. Spinning in a park I didn't recognize. My voice off camera, laughing. The sound wasn't synced. Her mouth said, "I love you." But what I heard was, "Why weren't you there?" I turned away. Every mannequin in the store had turned to face me. Every single one. My chest heaved. The dog tags felt like they were trying to pull away, vibrating so violently that I thought the chain would snap. I turned back to the video screen just in time to see it change. It now showed Afghanistan. My squad, Ramirez, Martinez, Chen, our. Last night alive, our last patrol, and then the explosion. The screen went black. The mannequin stepped forward, just once in unison. Not walking, just closer. A whisper reached me from the back of the store. "You left us." It wasn't angry. It was sad, accusatory in the way only truth can be. I ran, back through the aisle of mannequins, through the broken boards, past the corridor of mirrors, back to the escalators, breath ragged, heart pounding. And when I stopped, just for a second, to collect myself, I looked back. The mannequins hadn't followed, but the reflection in the glass beside me had, and it smiled. The escalators groaned under my weight as I climbed, metal teeth grinding beneath my boots, like some mechanical jaw, reluctant to bear the burden of the living. The mall stretched below in a patchwork of decay and flickering shadows, mannequins, frozen in lifelike stillness. The corridor I'd just fled from crawling with a silence that wasn't still at all. I could feel the place shifting behind me, rearranging itself when I wasn't looking. The second floor opened up like a wound, dark and exposed. Only a handful of lights still worked up here, casting broken halos that didn't quite reach the floor. My breath fogged the air. It was colder up here, or maybe the heaviness of what I'd seen was finally settling in. The clipboard was nearly torn from where I gripped it. I forced myself to check it again, half expecting the rules to have changed. But there it was, still legible, smudged with oil and some substance I hadn't dared to name. Rule 4. If the world starts to bleed, close your eyes and count to 10. I'd already followed that one once. I hadn't planned to do it again. From here I could see the entrances to the cinema, twin black doors that stood slightly ajar. Above them, the old sign flickered, now showing. But the display beneath was blank, the plastic letters long since fallen or burned away. The mall's hum intensified near the theater, as though it were collecting there, pooling like fog just behind the doors. The air was charged, like the moments before a storm or a firefight. My lighter wouldn't spark. I tried 3 times before giving up. I pushed the doors open. Inside, the darkness was near total, broken only by the faint red glow of exit signs, and a single flickering projector beam cutting across the empty auditorium. The smell hit me first. Mildewed carpet, scorched plastic, old popcorn gone sour. My boots made no sound on the thick carpet, swallowed by the weight of silence. Then came the singing, soft, fragile. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Sophie's voice, the one I used to sing to her before deployments, before bedtime when she was scared of the dark. The one Laya played at her funeral. I froze. The song stopped. I turned toward the source, the screen. But there was no screen. Just open wall, yet the projector continued to cast its beam, and within that beam images flickered, faces contorted in panic, bodies pressed against glass, smoke curling through air, the fire, Anchor Point on the day it died. I stepped closer. A girl appeared on the screen, early 20s maybe, brunette, her face frozen in a scream. Behind her, a blur of shoppers surged in panic. Decorations for Black Friday and early Christmas sales hung from the ceiling. The moment of chaos, the moment before death. "Were you here?" I asked, as if the image might answer. The image shifted. The girl was calm now, holding a shopping bag and smiling. Her mouth moved, silently saying something. "Got it," I read on her lips. Waited all night, but I got the last one. Then back to panic, then flames, then stillness. A high-pitched hum rose in the air. My dog tags vibrated violently. The teddy bear in my pocket seemed to writhe. "You don't belong here," I said. "That's debatable," came a voice behind me. I spun around. A figure stood at the front of the theater, half shrouded in darkness. A Marine Corps uniform. Dog. Tags, half a face molded from mannequin plastic, the other half real. Familiar Ramirez or something wearing his voice. "Good to see you, sir." The words were perfect, but there was static underneath them, like radio interference. "You're not him," I said. "Yes, sir, I am. And I'm not. Death isn't what we thought it was. Neither is life." He stepped forward, boots silent on the carpet. The mannequins were here too, seated in the rows around me, completely still, watching. "What do you want?" I asked. "The same as you," he said. "A way out." My hands trembled. "You're part of this, of them," he nodded. "We call ourselves the Drifters, 37 of us. Souls caught between worlds. The fire didn't just kill us, it broke the rules. This mall sits on a fracture now, a place where realities bleed into each other." He stepped closer and I didn't move. "Couldn't." "You hear it, don't you?" he said. "The frequency." I nodded. "We tried to reach out. We didn't expect someone like you to answer. But you hear us clearer than anyone else." "Why?" Ramirez tapped his chest, his dog tags vibrating in rhythm with mine. "Veterans hear it best, especially the broken ones." The mannequins turned their heads slowly to face me. "You've been circling the drain for years," Ramirez continued, "drifting between shelters, drowning in bottles. You think you came here for punishment, but maybe you came here for a decision." My mouth was dry. "What decision?" Ramirez raised a hand. The projector beam changed. This time it showed me. Years ago, before the accident, clean-shaven, bright-eyed, sitting around a table with my squad, playing cards, laughing. The memory burned. Then the scene shifted. Laya, Sophie, our living room, her 6th birthday. The cake, the candles, the song. "I can take you there," Ramirez said, "to a version of that world, one where the accident never happened, one where you didn't lose them." My heart stuttered. "That's not real." "It's real," he said, "just not here." "And the cost?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pointed at the mannequins. "They're us, the ones who died in the fire. We've kept the fracture open, but it's fading. If you step through, the rest of us will be trapped here forever." The static in the air thickened. My skin prickled. "I can't do that," I whispered. "You can, and maybe you should," Ramirez said, softer now. "But it has to be your choice." The theater shook suddenly. The tremor began at my feet and moved upward, rattling the seats, dislodging dust from the ceiling. "Close your eyes," Ramirez commanded. "Count." I obeyed. 1, 2, 3. The world convulsed. The hum turned into a scream. My tags burned. 9, 10. When I opened my eyes, the mannequins were gone. The theater was empty, the screen blank. The red lights dim. Ramirez stood alone, his mannequin half melting away. "We're out of time," he said. "If you want answers, you'll have to come to the center. The bleed has begun." And with that, he vanished into the dark, leaving only the hum, and my heartbeat, and the impossible choice waiting ahead. I left the cinema shaken, barely aware of my surroundings as I stepped back into the second-floor corridor. The hum was louder now, Not a background buzz anymore, but a presence, a pulse. It pressed against my skull, vibrated in my bones, thrummed. In my dog tags like a warning and a welcome all at once. The mall had shifted again. I could feel it, like walls rearranged themselves when I blinked, like something beneath the floor tiles was breathing slow and deep. The mannequin at the top of the escalators was gone. In its place, black streaks ran down the wall like tears, glistening under the stuttering fluorescence. The smell had changed too. Less plastic and dust, more copper and ozone, metallic and sharp like the air before lightning strikes. I descended slowly, every step creaking beneath my weight, hand gripped tight on the lighter. Even though I hadn't been able to get a spark in over an hour, the courtyard below was no longer the same. Where before there had been dusty potted plants and a dry, coin-filled fountain, now there was motion, subtle but wrong. The air shimmered, with distortion, like heat rising off asphalt. In the center, just above the empty fountain, the shimmer coalesced into a whirling column, faint at first but gaining density. With each second I stared at it. It was alive, but not. A glitch in reality. A wound that refused to close. And then the pennies started to float. They lifted slowly at first, quivering in the air, then began to spin, forming a disk of glinting bronze, shimmering, rotating, vibrating in rhythm with the hum. Within the disk, images began to form, not random ones, scenes, memories. I saw shoppers trampled in the smoke, mannequins melting into walls, haze screaming into a dead radio, flames licking up his legs. Then the scene changed. Afghanistan, my squad, the fee. Moment before. Children playing soccer near the road. The one who'd stood by the gate with something clutched in his hands. The one I'd told Ramirez not to worry about. I turned my head, but the image didn't stop. You couldn't have known, came a voice from nowhere, Ramirez's voice, but also Chen's and Martinez's, others, dozens of them, a chorus. You couldn't have shot a child. I staggered away from the fountain's edge, breath catching in my throat. The disc shattered midair, coins clattering back into the fountain like a distant gunfire salute. I sank to my knees. I should have seen. The signs, I whispered. I should have known. The frequency surged. You wanted to believe it wasn't a threat, said the voices. So you did. That's not guilt. That's grief. Then came the question I wasn't ready for. And what about them? I didn't. Have to ask who liar, Sophie. The hum slowed, turned inward. And then the oil began to flow from the walls, from the ceiling, thick and black and reflective. It bled like the building was crying out the memories it had absorbed. Hayes's voice whispered back into my memory. If the walls sweat oil, don't look at the reflections. I kept my eyes low, fixed on the floor, but even that began to shimmer. The oil spread across the tiles like a living thing, converging on the fountain and pooling into channels that spiraled outward. Then something strange happened. The oil began to pulse. Light traced through it. Blood red, then deep blue, then a color I couldn't name. The pattern formed a map, Anchor Point Plaza's exact layout. I recognized the wings, the food court, the toy store, the cinema, even the security office. Glowing dots blinked slowly within the schematic. 37 of them arranged across the plaza. Those are where they died, I murmured. And at the center of the map, where I stood, another light appeared. 38th, brighter than the rest. It pulsed not in time with the hum, but with my own heartbeat. A voice whispered behind me, "You are the nexus." I turned. No one. Just the fountain. The oil swirling. The light pattern widening. And then the map grew. Beyond the mall. Into the city. The country. The world. Tiny lights appeared across the globe. Each one a fracture, a moment, a place where a choice had broken the natural order, all blinking, all watching. We exist between, said the voices, where time folds, where consequences echo. The fire didn't just kill us, it tore a hole. And now, the tear has grown. What am I supposed to do? I asked, voice hollow. You'll know, they said. When the offer is made, I wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but my body didn't move. The bear in my pocket pulsed with unnatural warmth, and then I heard her Sophie laughing. The sound of a child, clear, joyful, real. I turned on instinct. She wasn't there. But a ripple passed through the air, brushing against my cheek like breath. You can go to her, said Ramirez's voice. You saw what's possible. There's a version of the world where they lived, where you didn't fail them, where you weren't passed out on the couch with a bottle in your hand. The hum deepened, growing richer, layered. It wasn't just a sound anymore, it was a call, a frequency not just of machines, but of longing. And then the fountain lit up again. New images. Laya, sitting on the couch, reading. Sophie, older now, coloring at the table, tongue between her teeth like she always did when concentrating. They looked up, and they saw me. Devon, Laya whispered, reaching. Daddy, Sophie shouted, running toward the edge of the fountain's pool. I stepped forward, but the mannequin from earlier blocked my path. The same one with the cracked face. It raised its arm, not to point, to stop, and then came Hayes's voice, real this time. Not yet. I turned. He sat slouched in his wheelchair, emerging from the shadow like he'd been watching the whole time. His face was paler. Oil dripped from his fingers. The rift isn't stable. The more they reach for you, the more the bleed spreads. I looked back at the fountain. The images wavered. What am I supposed to choose? I asked, voice cracking. Hayes didn't answer, directly. Instead, he rolled closer to the fountain, trailing black streaks behind his wheels. You think you're here to be punished, he said. But that's not why the mall called to you. The frequency doesn't want penance, it wants resolution. The images shifted again, scenes not from my life, but from the lives of the 37 who had died here. The girl from the toy store, whole again, laughing, a mother shielding her baby, a janitor pulling the fire alarm. Moments frozen in their final seconds, and then they all looked toward me. Not with anger, not even sadness, but expectation, waiting. You are the one. The frequency answered, Hayes said softly. And now the center of the tear is calling you. What happens next depends on whether you can give them peace, or whether you'll take your own. The hum pulsed once more, and the light turned inward. The fountain went dark. The oil retreated, and for a moment there was silence. Not absence, not peace, but the silence of something waiting to be decided. The silence that followed the retreat of the oil wasn't comforting. It was cavernous, expectant, a lull in a conversation before the scream. I stood at the edge of the now still fountain, my breath shallow, eyes fixed on where Sophie's face had just been, shimmering in impossible light. The warmth in my chest faded, replaced by a hollow ache, like something had been scooped out of me and left to bleed. I knew I had to move. Hayes had told me there was more to see. The department. Store at the north end, the source of the frequency, the place where the fire had started and the rift had been torn open. But I didn't move. Couldn't. My legs were locked in place, my fingers white-knuckled around the lighter that hadn't sparked in hours. Then the temperature dropped. Not gradually, violently, like I'd been plunged into an icy river. My breath came out in clouds. The hum returned, but it wasn't soft this time. It roared through the vents, the tiles, my skull. The hair on my arms stood up, and the lights overhead flickered once, twice, then died completely. And from beneath the escalators, a shape detached itself from the dark. At first, I thought it was a mannequin. It moved like one, disjointed, limbs jerking at odd angles, its body too tall and too thin. But it wasn't plastic. It was shadow, moving with weight, glistening like oil under invisible light, its head cocked sideways in a motion no human neck could ever replicate. And then it spoke. "Why did you let them die, Sergeant?" The voice wasn't just sound. It was interference, radio static laced, with broken glass grinding against the inside of my skull. I backed up a step, heart hammering in my throat. "You don't get to ask that," I said through clenched teeth. The shadow took another step forward. Its mouth opened, or maybe split. Two. Wide, too deep. Inside were teeth, too many teeth. Rows and rows of them. Some chipped, some needle-sharp, all glistening with something slick and black. It grinned. "I asked you a question." My fingers trembled, instinctively reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. "Why did you let them die? Your squad, your wife, your daughter? All those people you were supposed to protect?" I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from answering. I tasted blood. The clipboard. I remembered Rule 6. Scrawled in rushed, cramped writing at the bottom. Margin dot Rule 6. Never answer a shadow with too many teeth. The creature's grin widened. Silent treatment, huh? That's not like you. You used to be full of speeches, orders, promises. It circled me slowly, limbs dragging like it was half gliding, half limping. Orders to keep them safe. Promises to get them home. "And what happened, Sergeant?" It leaned close, so close I could feel the cold pouring off its skin, smell the rotten sulfur in its breath. "You watched them die." The words cut deeper than any blade, because they were true. Because I believed them. I swallowed hard, tried to keep my eyes forward, my mouth shut. But it kept circling. "They believed in you," it hissed. "Your men, your little girl, your wife. They thought you were a hero." It spat the last word like poison. "But you're no hero." The lighter in my hand flared to life suddenly, blue flame hissing in the dark. I hadn't even clicked the wheel. It just lit. The shadow recoiled. For half a second, then laughed. A gurgling, radio-static sound that seemed to come from everywhere. "You think that'll save you?" it asked, its voice warping, overlapping with others. Men, women, children, all of them blaming, accusing. "I tried," I whispered, the words slipping out unbidden. The shadow lunged. I threw myself backward, hit the tile floor hard, my back screaming. The creature landed where I'd stood, crouched like some grotesque insect, teeth clicking. "You don't get to say that anymore," it growled. "You've had 6 years to say it. And now? You want absolution?" It pounced again. But something slammed into me from the side, a force strong and sudden. I tumbled through an open doorway and hit the floor of what I realized too late was a dressing room. Behind me, the door slammed shut. I lay there, gasping, pain radiating down my spine. My ribs ached. My palms were scraped raw from the fall, and then I saw it. The mannequin, the one-armed one, standing in the corner of the room, motionless. It had shoved me. It had saved me. "Thank you," I whispered, meaning it. The mannequin didn't respond, but its head tilted slightly to one side, almost as if acknowledging me. I stood slowly, legs shaking. The room was cramped, lined with mirrors on every wall. A single light bulb dangled overhead, swaying with no wind, casting dizzying shadows that multiplied across the glass. And then the mirrors changed. They didn't reflect the room anymore. They showed my living room, Liar. Sophie, whole, alive. Liar was reading on the couch, her hair falling across her shoulders. Sophie was drawing on the floor, humming to herself. They looked up and saw me. "Devon," Liar said, her voice warm, soft, real. "Daddy!" Sophie squealed. She ran to the glass, palms pressed to the other side. They were smiling, beaming. "We've been waiting for you," they said in unison. My knees buckled. I reached out, touching the glass. It wasn't cold. It rippled like water. A door, a way through. My tags vibrated again. Hot, painful. I didn't care. I stepped forward, closer to the mirror, closer to them. Then something grabbed my wrist, hard. I turned. The mannequin. Its single arm was wrapped around my wrist, pulling me back. "Let go," I snapped. "Not yet," said a voice from behind me. Hayes. His eye. Wheelchair creaked as he rolled into the room. His face looked more hollow than ever. The oil was retreating from his skin, but slowly. "That's not the choice you're meant to make," he said. "But they're real," I choked. "They're right there." "They're a reality," Hayes said quietly. "Not ours, not anymore. The drifters showed you what you wanted. But there's always a price." The mirrors began to warp. Laya and Sophie's smiles faded into confusion, then into sadness. The mannequin let go. The ripple in the mirror stilled. I stood in the dressing room, heart breaking all over again. "You were never here for a reunion," Hayes said. "You were here for a decision." And with that, the room returned to what it had been: mirrors, mannequin, silence. I looked down at the teddy bear in my pocket. Its glass eyes stared up at me, reflecting not my face, but Sophie's. The dressing room no longer felt like a refuge. It had become a trap, silent, reflective, and far too aware of me. The mirrors, now dimmed to show only my own exhausted face, seemed to judge me in every angle. My breath came in shallow gasps. I couldn't stop shaking. The warmth of the reunion I just glimpsed was still lodged somewhere in my chest, burning like the final embers of a dream I wasn't allowed to keep. Hayes sat motionless near the door, his fingers curled over the armrests of his wheelchair-like claws. He watched me with tired eyes, his scarred face unreadable in the swaying light. I could tell he'd seen this before. Others reaching for what they couldn't have, lured by illusions that felt more honest than reality. "That wasn't a trick," I said, more to myself than him. "They were real. I saw them." He nodded, slowly. "Real in the way dreams are real, in the way memories are real. That world exists, Devon, but not for you. Not anymore." I turned away, unable to meet his gaze. The mannequin stood quietly in the corner again, as though it hadn't just saved me from stepping through a veil I might never have returned from. Its one remaining arm now rested at its side, fingers stiff and curled. "I could have stayed," I murmured. "I could have been with them again. They wanted me there." "They wanted him," Hayes corrected. "The you who died in that reality, the Devon who never drank, who drove them that night, who stayed alive in their world." The truth stung. My knees buckled and I slumped into the cracked leather stool near the mirror. The lighter fell from my grip and landed on the dusty floor. It flickered once, dim and blue, then died again. "They looked so happy," I whispered. "Sophie." She was older, taller. Laya had grey in her hair. They moved on. Hayes said nothing for a while. The only sound was the faint hum that never seemed to go away in this place, the pulse of something larger than the mall, than us. "You weren't meant to see that yet," he said finally. "But the drifters, they're desperate. The frequency, Kill's thinning. The bleed is accelerating. They don't want to vanish into the void. So they showed me my old life," I said bitterly. "Dangled it in front of me like a carrot." "They showed you your desire," Hayes corrected. "But even that was filtered through your guilt. If you'd stayed, you wouldn't have belonged. You would have been a ghost wearing someone else's face." I stared at my reflection again. My eyes looked ancient, haunted. There was blood on my neck from where the dog tags had seared my skin during the earlier tremor. "What now?" I asked. Hayes turned his wheelchair toward the exit. "Now you finish the patrol. Department stores next. That's where the rift began. That's where it ends. And if they're going to make the real offer, it'll be there." "The real offer?" "What you saw in the mirror. That wasn't the deal. That was the bait." He rolled toward the door, his wheels squeaking on the warped tile. "Come on, you've seen the lies. Time to meet the truth." I followed him, slower this time. Not because I was afraid, but because I finally understood the weight of what I'd been carrying for the last 6 years. Not just the guilt, not just the loss, but the fantasy. The belief that somewhere out there I could undo it all, rewind the tape and fix the things I broke. That was the perfect lie. And I had believed it with all my heart. The hallway outside was different again. The mannequins were still. The walls no longer bled, but the floor was damp with streaks of evaporating oil. The hum in the air had settled into a steady throb, like a countdown too slow to track but too loud to ignore. Hayes led us back past the escalators and into the main atrium, where the fountain still glistened faintly. I avoided looking into it. I didn't need to see more of what I couldn't have. He stopped at the edge of the atrium, where the corridor to the department store gaped like a mouth waiting to swallow us whole. "I can't go with you," he said. "This part you do alone." I turned to him. "Because it's dangerous?" He shook his head. "Because the offer they're going to make, only you can decide, and only you will understand the cost." I hesitated. "If I say yes, will they be free?" He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, "Some of them, the ones who still remember who they are, the ones who still want to be free." I nodded. My throat was dry, my fingers trembling. I started down the corridor alone. The walls began to close in. The tiles curled at the edges like they were melting. The lights overhead buzzed, flickered, then went out completely. I walked into the dark with only the weight of the teddy bear in my pocket and the silence of the frequency pressing against my ribs. Somewhere up ahead, the truth waited. And this time, I wouldn't run. The corridor leading to the department store felt like it existed outside of time. Each step I took echoed too long, like the sound had to fight its way through molasses. The walls shimmered faintly in the darkness, pulsing with a bluish undertone, like the whole mall was breathing through them. As I moved deeper, the floor beneath my boots changed from tile to something more unstable, something that rippled slightly with each footfall. I didn't need the clipboard anymore to know what this meant. If the floor warps, close your eyes and count to 10. But I didn't close my eyes this time. I kept them wide open. If I was going to face whatever waited at the heart of this place, I needed to look. I needed to see it. The entrance to the store was still partially intact. The glass windows had long since shattered, their jagged remains jutting like teeth from the rusted frames. The metal signage that once proudly bore the store's name now hung lopsided, melted and blackened. The moment I stepped inside, the air changed. The hum became a tone, a single frequency, constant, pure. It was like standing inside a bell right after it had been struck, vibrating through my ribs and skull. My dog tags pulsed in rhythm, as if they were tuning forks picking up some deeper note. This was the source, the frequency's heart, and it was alive. Inside the department store was a graveyard of consumerism. Toppled mannequins lay in crumpled poses, like casualties on a battlefield. Display tables were overturned, price tags fluttering gently in an invisible wind. Shelves had collapsed in on themselves, their contents melted or fused together. Dresses, with electronics, cosmetics with shoes, and mirrors, everywhere. Full-length mirrors, makeup mirrors, broken hand mirrors, scattered like shattered snowflakes. But none of them reflected me. Each showed something different. A scene, a person, a life. Young couple arguing in a kitchen, a child lighting a candle, a soldier stepping off a plane, and in each one somewhere, sometimes hidden, sometimes front and center, was me. Not me as I was now, but other versions. The one who stayed sober, the one who never left the core, the one who died in the fire, the one who made it home in time. It was unbearable, like watching 1,000 answers to a question I didn't know how to ask. And then, amid the mirrors, he appeared. Ramirez. More solid now, The mannequin half of him had receded further, revealing the face I remembered, older, weathered but intact, a scar above his brow, stubble like sand. He wore his old desert camo utilities, dog tags identical to mine hanging from his neck. "It's time," he said. "For what?" I asked, though I already knew. "To see what could be, to make the choice." He gestured toward the center of the store, where the floor had warped into a shallow depression filled with swirling oil. A portal, a mirror, a breach. I stepped closer. The surface shifted, and below it, I saw it, my home, not as I'd left it, broken and hollow, but whole, clean, lived in. Sophie was there. She looked older now, 11, maybe 12, taller, brighter. A kid who had grown into her own skin. Laya was there too, laughing on the couch, her hair touched with grey, her smile unchanged. I fell to my knees. They looked happy. Whole. "I can go to them?" I asked. "Yes," Ramirez said. "There's a rift, a tear between realities. The fire opened it. We've kept it open. But it's weakening. This is your last chance to cross." I looked up at him. "What happens if I do?" He was silent, for a moment. Then, "We use everything we've gathered to widen it enough for you to pass through. Every trace of energy the drifters have kept alive, every fragment of memory, every piece of what we are. It will all go into this, and you'll be trapped." He nodded. "Yes, no more frequency, no more reaching out, just the dark." I wanted to look away, but couldn't. "There are 37 of us," he continued. "Those who died in the fire. Some are too far gone to understand what they're giving. But the rest of us, those who still feel, we offer this willingly." I stared into the rift again. Sophie was laughing. She threw her arms around Laya, and for a moment I believed I could live there. Be him, the version of me that didn't destroy everything. I could be him, I whispered. Ramirez didn't argue. "But he died 3 years ago," he said softly. "Heart attack. They've mourned you, moved on. They'd believe it was a miracle, but you'd know and we would never leave." I clenched my fists. My nails dug into my palms. "There has to be another way," I said. "Some other solution." "There isn't," Ramirez replied. "We've searched. We've had 6 years to search. This is the only way you can have them again. The only way they can be more than memory." The frequency around us rose. The mirrors began to crack, one by one. Mannequins outside the breach dissolved into dust, their sacrifice rippling into the breach like sparks into a fire. Time was running out, and then I saw Hayes in the corner, slumped in his chair, oil crawling up his arms, watching, not resisting. He nodded once, then Sophie looked up, and for the first time in years, our eyes met. "Daddy." My body moved on its own. I stepped forward. The breach widened. Warm air spilled out. A scent, cinnamon, soap, home. I reached out my hand. Her fingers stretched toward mine. Then I stopped. I remembered what Hayes had said. The hardest choice isn't between right and wrong. It's between what you want and what they need. I looked back, at Ramirez, at the mannequins dissolving, at the mall and its agony, at the 37 lives holding the breach open, asking nothing in return except the chance to finally rest. My hand trembled in the air and I pulled it back. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Laya looked up. Sophie's smile faltered. The breach pulsed. The oil flickered. Behind me, Ramirez's voice broke. Gentle, solemn. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "They deserve to live their life, not to be haunted by a shadow of what was. I don't belong there." He stepped aside, and I turned toward the source of the hum, the PA system in the corner, the hub of the frequency, and with everything I had, I hurled the lighter at it. The impact was small. The silence afterward was not. The frequency died. Not faded. Died. The hum evaporated. The mirrors cracked, and the breach collapsed with a final brilliant burst of blue light. When my eyes adjusted, the mannequins were gone. In their place stood people, whole, radiant, free. The girl from the toy store smiled. A janitor saluted me. Ramirez stood still, proud, whole. One by one, they dissolved into motes of light and rose, into the ceiling, into peace, into silence. And when it was done, only Hayes and I remained. He looked better, straighter, his skin no longer crawling with black veins. "You could still go," he said. "The breach left a trace. You've earned it." I looked toward the space where it had been. Nothing. Just air. "No," I said softly. "They've moved on." I should too. For a long time I didn't move. The department store was unrecognizable now, no longer distorted by time or grief, no longer pulsing with static or swimming in oil. The mirrors had all shattered, their shards strewn across the floor like dead stars. The mannequins were gone, replaced by the faint echo of voices I would never hear again. The frequency had ended. The hum that had once lived in my bones, always whispering behind every breath, was gone. Silence, true and whole, filled the space left behind. I stood in that silence like a man surfacing from deep water, lungs tight with the memory of drowning. Unsure if breathing would hurt more than holding it in, Hayes wheeled himself forward slowly. He looked like a man who'd been returned from something unspeakable. The oil that had been climbing his arms was gone, leaving behind pale scars and tired eyes. For the first time, he didn't look like part of the mall. He looked like someone who might actually be free of it. "You made the right call," he said quietly. I didn't answer. Not at first. "I don't know if it was right," I said eventually, "but it was mine." He nodded like that mattered more than anything else. Outside the department store, the mall was changing, not collapsing, not repairing, but settling. The walls were still cracked, the tiles still chipped, but the air felt different. Less like a dying thing gasping for attention, and more like a body finally at rest. We walked, or rolled in his case, back toward the central courtyard. There were no more shadows hiding under the escalators. No mannequins waiting in the T, corners with twisted necks, just stillness. A quiet so complete it was almost holy. The teddy bear was still in my pocket. Its fur was singed and matted. Its single glass eye had stopped reflecting anything supernatural. Now it just looked like what it was. A forgotten toy, burned and broken, but held onto by someone who couldn't let go. We reached the fountain. It was dry again. The coins were scattered across the basin, no longer levitating, no longer forming. Images or memories, just coins now, copper and green with rust. Pennies, nickels, dimes, all meaningless until someone gives them a wish. I sat on the fountain's edge, letting the silence wrap around me. Hayes parked beside me, his wheelchair squeaking softly as he adjusted his position. "What happens now?" I asked. He looked up at the glass dome overhead. Through it I could see the sky beginning to lighten, not the strange, colorless twilight that had settled over Anchor Point for the last 6 hours, but a real dawn. Faint rays of pale orange breaking through night. "Now," he repeated. "Now we leave. That's it. That's everything," he turned the lighter over in my hand. It didn't spark anymore. The inscription on the side, "To Devon, Love, Liar," was worn smooth but still legible. A scar etched in brass. "I thought it would feel different," I said. "More redemptive." Hayes smiled faintly. "Redemption isn't about how it feels. It's about what you choose when no one's watching." I thought of Sophie, her hand pressed against the mirror. I thought of Liar's voice calling my name. I thought of all the versions of me I had seen, the ones who were better, stronger, sober. I would never be those men, but I had made a choice they might not have. I rose to my feet, my joints cracking like old hinges. Every part of me ached, but it was a familiar ache now, an ache I could carry, not like guilt, not like grief. This was just pain, human, endurable. We made our way back through the mall, past the food court, where the tables were no longer set for the dead, past the toy store where no voices called to me from the dark, past the corridor of mirrors, now empty of all but dust and glass. As we reached the main entrance, I stopped the fire. Glass doors were still cracked, but the view beyond them had changed. The world outside looked real again, solid. The parking lot was still empty, but the shadows no longer shifted. The sky no longer bled blue static. I could smell morning dew through the broken glass. Hayes turned to me. "What will you do now?" "You thought about that? Really thought I'd spent 6 years drifting, from shelter to shelter, bottle to bottle, nightmare to nightmare. I had tried to drown in guilt and failed. I had tried to forget and failed harder. I had begged for a second chance, and tonight I had been offered one, but instead of taking it, I gave it away. Maybe that meant something. "I'll start over," I said. "Find a way forward." Hayes nodded like he approved. Then, after a moment, he reached into the side pouch of his chair and pulled something out, a folded piece of paper, yellowed and fragile. He held it out to me. "What is it?" "A copy of the original fire report," he said. "I kept it. Don't ask me why. Maybe I needed proof. Maybe I just wanted someone else to see it." I unfolded the page. 37 names. Cause of fire. Electrical. Confirmed victims, no mention of paranormal activity. No mention of drifters. No mention of me. But there, written in the margins in Hayes's own trembling hand, were the rules. 1 through 7. Each one a scar. Each one a truth. I refolded the page and slid it into my jacket pocket next to the teddy bear. My fingers brushed the singed fur, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel a punch to the gut. Just memory. I opened the door. The cold air hit me like a baptism, sharp and clean. I stepped outside, the crunch of gravel under my boots louder than it should have been. The sun was climbing now, slow and golden. I crossed the parking lot and sat on a bench near the far edge, facing the building. Hayes waited behind, still inside, but I knew he'd come. He just needed time. The mall looked smaller in the daylight, less like a gateway to somewhere forgotten, and more like what it truly was, a ruin, a mausoleum for the lost. But the weight of it had changed. It no longer pulled at me. It no longer whispered. I sat back, letting the early light warm my face. The teddy bear rested in my lap, its one eye glinting, not reflecting a ghost or a memory, but the sunrise. And for the first time in 6 years, I let myself believe that I could change, that maybe the mall hadn't cursed me. Maybe it had freed me. The sun had fully breached the horizon when Hayes rolled out of the mall. He didn't say anything at first. He didn't need to. His wheelchair moved slower than usual, his hands trembling slightly on the wheels, but he looked lighter, like some weight had finally been lifted from his shoulders. We sat there in silence for a while, two men shaped by fire and loss, watching the daylight push shadows back into the cracks where they belonged. Anchor Point Plaza stood quiet behind us. There were no more voices in the walls, no more whispers echoing from empty storefronts, no more mannequins waiting for a cue that would never come. The mall wasn't healed, it was still broken, still scarred, but it was silent. And sometimes silence is the loudest sign that something has ended. "I used to think this place wanted to punish me," I said, not looking at Hayes. He nodded. "It wanted to remember you." That sat with me for a moment. heavy but not crushing. I had spent so long wrapped in the belief that I deserved every nightmare, every ache, every hallucination that clawed at me in the dark. But now, after everything, I realized the mall hadn't chosen me because I was broken. It had chosen me because I was unfinished. I thought about stepping through, I admitted. I know, Hayes said. Everyone does. They were there. Hayes, Laia, Sophie. A version of them at least, and they wanted me. He didn't reply immediately. Instead, he took a deep breath like the morning air meant something more now. They were real, he said. Just not yours. That's the trick of the bleed. It shows you what you could have, just long enough to make you question what you're willing to give up. I wanted to give up everything, I said, but when it mattered, I didn't. That's why you're still here. It wasn't absolution, but it was enough. I stood and looked down at the teddy bear in my hand. Burned, soaked in oil, its seams barely holding. Once it had carried the voice of my daughter. Once it had led me deeper into a nightmare I didn't think I'd return from. Now it was just quiet, a remnant, a weight I could finally carry without breaking under it. I think I need to do something with this, I said. Hayes raised an eyebrow. You thinking what I'm thinking? I smiled faintly. Maybe. We drove into town an hour later. The streets were familiar, but distant, like I was seeing them through new eyes. Or perhaps old eyes finally waking up. People bustled through their routines. Kids waiting for school buses. A woman walking her dog. A man unlocking his shop. No one screamed. No one vanished into shadows. No one bled static. We found a small park on the edge of town. One of those community places with rusted swings, a faded jungle gym, and a sandbox that had more cigarette butts than toys. But there was a bench, a tree, and a sense of quiet that didn't come from trauma, but from peace. I knelt by the tree and dug a shallow hole beneath its roots. Then carefully I placed the bear inside, tucked it gently into the earth like laying something to rest. Not a burial, a return. She loved this park, I said. Used to draw suns in the sandbox, called them smiley skies. Hayes chuckled softly. She sounds like the kind of kid who made you better. She was. I stood. We didn't say anything for a while. The breeze moved through the branches above us, sending golden leaves drifting to the ground like slow-moving sparks. I watched one land on my boot and didn't brush it off. You going back to drifting? Hayes finally asked. No, I said. I've drifted long enough. I didn't have a plan yet, no job, no place to live. Just a lighter in my pocket, a name I wasn't done carrying, and a mind no longer shackled to what might have been. But it was enough to begin with. I think I'll start with helping someone, I said. Someone who's where I was. There's no shortage of vets who don't know how to come home. Hayes nodded slowly. You'll be good at that. He extended his hand and I shook it. Firm, grounded. The hand of someone who had walked through hell and come out the other side, not whole, but human. As I turned to leave, I glanced back at the tree. The soil was still fresh, but in time, grass would grow. The roots would carry something old into something new, and maybe one day someone would sit beneath that tree and not feel haunted, but held. The sky was blue now, soft and endless. The mall was behind me. The silence was over, and for the first time in 6 years I was walking forward, not away but toward something. Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If these stories sent chills down your spine, don't keep the fear to yourself. Leave a comment, smash that like button, and share this video with someone who dares to listen in the dark. We release terrifying true stories every week, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's lurking in the shadows. This is High Scare Stories, where nightmares don't end when the video does. Until next time, stay safe and stay scared.